We are very, very excited. We're scrambling. We're getting ready for the Arena Summit here in LA, and we're just thrilled people are coming from around the world, and I get to have this time together. We hope all of you guys can make it, or as many of you as possible. And one of the things that Aaron and I talked about a little bit before the session was, and I don't remember the exact phrase Aaron used, but it was basically how to talk about things you don't know about without looking like an idiot. You know, and we were talking about that moment, and a couple of them actually, but that moment when Kamala was speaking where it clearly meant, or looked like the teleprompter stopped and she kept saying the phrase 32 over again. And Aaron said, hey, how do you learn how to communicate without notes? How do you learn how to communicate without like a teleprompter or some kind of assistance? How do you learn how to express expertise and spontaneously and dynamically? And that is something I've worked at for decades and decades and decades. And I think there's several things, and I just, and it's not just that moment for her. You know, you can also see moments like with Donald Trump where, you know, in one moment you think he's going to talk about the subject, and then he goes off to how he looks better on the beach, you know, naked than Biden does, whatever, you know. And so, you know, you definitely have enough examples on both sides, and to talk about how to talk within your realm of expertise, how not to be dependent on scripts, on notes. And I kind of want to go back to the beginning a little bit of my own journey in communication. I had a person I really admired as a communicator when I was 21 years old or so, and I had maybe a 30-minute access to him. And he said to me something that I carried all my life. He said, speak on what you know, not on what you don't know. Now, that may not sound that profound, but it was incredibly profound. And because I think we all have a temptation to act like we know more than we know. And I think there's even a greater temptation to convince ourselves we know more than we actually know. And so I think sometimes we can speak on things where we know we don't know what we're talking about. Have you ever been there where you go like, wow, I just jumped off the cliff and I know I can't fly? But I do think there are other times where we're unaware we don't know. We think we do know, and it's so clear to the audience that we don't know. And that's almost a more dangerous space where you think you're flying, but you're falling. And a huge part of what has helped me learn how to communicate without notes, how to communicate without prompters and in a sense being handicapped, is that I talk about things I know, and I know that I know them because they've actually proven themselves out in real life. And so I've actualized them. I've implemented them. I've experienced them. Remember, the way your brain is designed, and I'm not sure what the most recent like neuroscience says on this, but when I first started looking at this stuff like 40 years ago, one of the things I saw was that the data in your brain or information in your brain is like, if you break it into 7 parts, it's 6 parts emotion or experience and 1 part data. And so that's why you can receive data and never remember it again, especially in a classroom, because if you're sitting in a classroom, you're not experiencing the data. And so it's very hard to actually retain that data because there's very little experience that's texturizing that information. But the moment you teach that information, or the moment you apply that information, or the moment you actualize it in some way, now you have experience and emotion attached to that data, that information that, you know, it's like, it's cold. But when you add emotion and experience, it becomes hot, and it becomes more dynamic to who you are. And so one of the things I early on began to do is whenever I learned something that I wanted to be able to talk about, I applied it really fast so that I instantaneously had a personal story or personal experience with that information. And if I didn't have a personal experience with it, I knew that I was memorizing it, but I wasn't internalizing it. And you can tell the difference. You can tell when a speaker is remembering information they've learned, or when a speaker is recalling information they've integrated. And it can be the same kind of information. It can be something from biology or botany. It can be something from neuroscience or from psychology or psychiatry. And if it's information you've memorized, you're having to pull it from a different part of your brain. And I don't have the kind of memory to be able to remember things that I do not have an emotional, psychological, or experiential connection to. Like I'm not that smart, but I am smart enough to remember things I've experienced, to remember things I have an emotional attachment to, and to remember things I actually have a memory about. So one of the huge reasons I'm able to use to speak without notes is that I integrate the information into my life experience very, very, very quickly. And I process the information based on how has this information or data changed me, affected me. And so now think about the difference. Like if you had to right now pull up the periodical table, there might be a few of you here who could actually pull up the whole thing, right? I don't know why we all had to memorize it. And our value and identity was based on whether we could remember that periodical table. And some of us were forever traumatized by it, right? And but if I asked you to tell me when you were born, where you were born, where you lived, if you have siblings, how many siblings, what their names are, you wouldn't have to even hesitate. And what's so ironic is that you shouldn't remember where you were born because you were 0, but it becomes a part of your story. You shouldn't necessarily remember where you were born unless you grew up there too, but you will, even though you were 0, 1 year old, 2 years old. And it's because it's integrated into your life experience. It's amazing the endless capacity you have to remember things you've experienced. It's also astonishing how little we can remember without experience. And by the way, that's why like you meet someone who's like great at math. Like they understand physics, they're able to remember formulas and proofs, and you're like, how do you remember all that? You know, one of the odd things about that person, they love math. There's actually an experiential relationship to math that you don't have if you don't love math. And that's why some people can remember so many instruments to be able to play because they love music. So what you love creates a larger filing cabinet than what you're interested in or what you want to be an expert in. So if you don't love something, just go, oh, I have a very limited memory capacity for this. And I just need to be aware of that and realize I'm always going to be just skimming the surface in this area because I just don't really love this area. I imagine there are topics that you just don't love. Things that just don't really matter. For some of you, it's politics. For some of you, it's religion. For some of you, it's the Bible. For some of you, it's sports. Honestly, it's really hard for me. It's really weird for me when I'm around like a 35-year-old man who doesn't know anything about sports. And I was thinking, how did you become a man? But I quickly, in fact, I had this conversation with someone this week, and I said, oh, you know what I've discovered? Because they were saying, I think it's generational. He said, I think the older generation really likes sports and the younger generation doesn't like it as much. And I said, I don't think it's generational. I think it's experiential. If you grew up playing sports, you kind of love sports because it's a part of your personal experience. And if you didn't grow up playing sports, you kind of have a nominal relationship with sports. Or if your father loved sports, you loved your father and you love watching sports with him. And so suddenly you love football because your dad loved football. And so a lot of people don't realize that even like their love for something is connected to something relational. My stepdad loved football. he was a gambler, so he bet on every game every week. And he would let me pick every team in the NFL except for two, the Miami Dolphins and the Minnesota Vikings. And so I got to pick the numbers. I understood odds. I understood, all the aspects of gambling. And he wouldn't let me pick those two teams because I hated the Dolphins and I loved the Vikings. He said, you should never bet on anything that you're emotionally connected to. And so I had a skewed perspective about those two teams. The Vikings were always going to win. The Dolphins were always going to lose. And the Dolphins went undefeated and had a perfect season. So I was wrong every single time about them. And one of the things, though, that I remember is that I love football because I loved having something to share with my stepdad. And I didn't love other sports because he didn't love them. And so but now like I know so much about sports because I have so many experiential memories around sports that have connected it deeply to me. And so you have to look at like your expertise area. It can only grow in the areas that you love in terms of being able to speak without memorization and to be able to speak spontaneously, to be able to speak dynamically and adaptively. And you might be interested in other areas, and your own IQ will determine how much capacity you have there, but it will always be recalling rather than reliving. And people will actually be able to feel that. And I'll give you an example of this. I was watching CNN this week, and I was noticing, and I know who it was, but I'm not going to say their name because I don't want to be too specific, but they were talking about the whole situation in the Middle East. And I could tell that they were reading the teleprompter word for word for word. And even though they were describing October 7th and the 1 year anniversary, I don't know if that's the right word to use, I could tell that she had no visceral, personal, or emotional connection to what happened in Israel. That she was actually reading it and sharing and reading really visceral language, reading a very, very powerful script. But it didn't translate. You could see it in her eyes. It was almost as if her eyes were dead to the emotional dynamic of what she was reading. And I've seen the flip side, where someone else is reading a teleprompter, but they're reading something that's deeply and profoundly connected to who they are. So the teleprompter doesn't limit them. It actually facilitates them because the teleprompter can't give you the texture of human emotion. And so you're almost not reading it. It's almost like it's inciting your brain to speak its truth with the words that are there. And it's very, very, very different. And I can tell you that in doing my audiobooks, when you're reading an audiobook, you still have to like be prompted by the words there. But I have to remind myself when I'm reading the audiobook to pay attention to what I've said. And do I still feel that the way I felt when I wrote it? And so now my job isn't just to read the audiobook, it's to relive the experience that caused me to write that book in that way, to say that phrase in the way that I said it, to communicate to the reader what I'm trying to communicate. And that one reason I love doing audiobook is that I feel like I get to connect at a different level, a visceral level, to the person who's listening, and they can know what parts of it even matter more, because every sentence doesn't matter the same, and it just doesn't. And then when you're dynamically connected to it, you can feel that variance. So let me just kind of like summarize all the ramblings that I just gave you. And all of us are going to have to communicate, whether on stage or on a one-on-one relationship with people. And we're all going to find ourselves having conversations outside of our expertise. And the two phrases that I think are really important to do that with authenticity and with integrity is to talk about what you know, not what you don't know, but to learn the power of I don't know. And I was sharing with Austin before we opened up the session here that when I gave myself permission to say, I don't know, I felt as if a million tons came off my chest. Because before that time in my life, I felt a moral and intellectual obligation to know everything. And it was such a burden on my life. I felt like I needed to know every philosopher in history if I were going to be credible. I need to understand every scientific movement if I was going to be credible. I had to understand every theological, philosophical, nuance throughout human history. And the burden was just too great. And I just wasn't smart enough to carry that kind of burden on my life. And the day I took a deep breath and said, I don't know, I felt like it was transformative on my life. And if I could circle all the way back to politics, the one thing a politician can't say is, I don't know. And it's like the kiss of death for them, right? They have to pretend to know everything. Do you really think that we've ever had a president who understood everything about foreign policy? I mean, do you really think we've ever had a president who understood everything about how an economy works? And do you really think that we've ever had a president who understood healthcare and medicine and vaccines and viruses? I mean, the level of expertise we're expecting this one person to have is so extraordinary that the burden of it would crush most of our psychological fragility. And so either one of two things has to happen. A person has to be so delusional that they believe they do know everything. And maybe we have candidates like that, or the person has to be so guarded that they have to hide everything they don't know. Neither one of those scenarios works out really well, not as a communicator and not as a leader. So what I would encourage us to do is, and this is what I did. I would talk about what I knew, and I knew it wasn't very much. And then I would grow and keep expanding what I knew. And then I would talk about what I knew, and that would be like my area of expertise. And then I would just keep growing, and then I could talk about what I knew. And so but ironically kind of worked the opposite. When I was in my 20s, I thought I knew this. When I was in my 30s, I thought I knew this. When I was in my 40s, I thought I knew this. When I was in 50s, I thought I knew this. And now that I'm in my 60s, I think I know this. And so what I think I know has gotten smaller and smaller and smaller, but the conviction of what I know has gone deeper and deeper and deeper. And I kind of wish I had the reckless self-confidence of my 20s, where I was just absolutely sure I was right about everything. And because sometimes I was more powerful just believing I was right than I have been in my older years by being right.
Can you talk about that relationship between belief and knowledge?
Yeah, it's very interesting because I think some people have more knowledge than belief. And so they always underachieve. And ironically, if you know more than someone else, but they believe more than you, there's a higher chance they will succeed than you. And you will be dumbfounded by life going, how can that idiot be more successful than me? And the reason is because they have a deeper belief than you do. And so I would say grow in your knowledge, but you have to the fuel is actually belief. And what you want to do is have your knowledge catch up to your belief, not have your belief pull down to your knowledge. Because what ends up happening is you don't believe in yourself and you don't know a whole lot, and you just become paralyzed in life. So in my 20s, I had so much belief that I could change the world, that I was right, that I knew how to make it happen. And I was so wrong, but it didn't stop me. And actually, sometimes it didn't even limit me, because I also had a voracious appetite to learn. And so I was learning at a really fast pace, but I don't know if my learning ever caught up to my belief until I was 40. And then when I was 40, I was like, wow, I was wrong about so many things. And God still used me, and I still had success, and I was still able to accomplish things. And so I think there's this interesting intersection between belief and knowledge. You're muted, Aaron. You're still muted.
Thank you for the reminder. The phone app sucks. Do you want to go to a couple questions?
Sure. Yeah, let's have a conversation.
Amazing. Let's go Bethany first, Austin. Hey, Bethany, how are you? Austin's going to unmute you.
Hi.
Good.
Okay, so I love that you are talking about this topic because I feel like it kind of tees up my question that I've been thinking about. But you've talked about before where when you talk from the stage about yourself, your life, your story, that people don't care or they won't connect if they can't see themselves in your story.
Mhm.
How do you craft your talks intentionally towards sharing your story or sharing something personal and making sure that the listener, the audience can see themselves in that and connect with it?
Yeah, I think one of the realities, and I'm just say this in the most basic way. Everyone can connect to your failures, and few people can connect to your success. So look at it as like a triangle. Everyone can connect to your pain, but few people can connect to your joy. Everyone can connect to like despair, but few people can connect to hope. Everyone can connect to bitterness, but few people can connect to forgiveness. As you move up the scale toward the highest version of yourself, fewer people can instantly identify. So if you're talking about, it's not arrogant if you started a company and sold it for $1 billion and say, I started a company, I sold it for $1 billion. Now, it may feel arrogant to everyone who didn't.
Okay.
Right? But for you, you're just stating a fact. But if you start with, I started a company and I sold it for $1 billion, there might be 0 people in the room who can connect to your story. But if you start with, when I began, I didn't know if I could accomplish anything in my life. I felt so empty and I felt so worthless and I felt like I didn't have talent. All of a sudden, the whole room connects with you.
Okay.
So if you want to connect with the room, start with the real of where you began and start with the most basic human experiences.
Okay.
And then realize that in life, there'll be very, very few people who actually will celebrate your success. You want to pretend it's different, but for some reason, most people are not psychologically predisposed to celebrate your success. They want to celebrate their own.
Mhm.
And so our successes at best become an inspiration of the possibility for their life. And here's when it doesn't work. It doesn't work when they can't see themselves in you. Like if they go, well, that person's just so different than me, their story doesn't really, relate to me.
Yeah.
So the more that they can relate to who you are or who you were,
Yeah.
the more they can relate to where you've gone or where you've come.
Okay.
Okay? Yeah.
Yeah. That's awesome. Thank you.
I'm very excited because I'm in the venue right now and we just got a special delivery for the arena thing, Dad, and I just touched it. It's crazy. It looks so good. Sorry. Just had to throw that out there. Andrew, how are you?
Hey, I'm doing great. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. So Erwin, as you are teaching other people to become better storytellers, as you're teaching them how to connect their stories to the information that they're trying to convey, are there some disciplines or some mechanisms, some things that you can recommend for helping people recognize the stories that are important in their life, that are most important in their life, so that they can carry those into their presentations?
That's a really great question. And I think that would be worthy of an entire book. And there's several things that I think come to mind. One is philosophical, one's very, very like tactile. And the philosophical one was what Aaron asked me earlier. He goes, "Hey, Dad, you talk about a lot of things you don't know anything about." And, he might have been a little more diplomatic, but that's basically what he was saying.
No, what I said is you do a great job of learning something new, but knowing the right facts about that new thing.
Yeah. And the way I can keep myself from looking like an idiot, talking about things that are just way bigger than me, is that I posture myself as a student and not a teacher. And so one of the ways you figure out how to add stories to your life is that you just always remain the student. The moment you're the teacher, you stop collecting stories. And as long as you're the student, you keep adding stories. And so if I had decided somewhere in my life, now I'm the teacher, I would have run out of stories. But because at 66, I'm still the student. And by the way, at 66, I'm a much better student than most 16-year-olds. I'm a way better student than most 26-year-olds and a way better student than most 36-year-olds, because I am so open to learning and desperate to learn and aware of my need to learn. And so to me, like one of the, in the arena, one of the most interesting, curious people is Mark Barley. Like, you know, he doesn't need to be here. He's already succeeded. He just loves learning, and he's curious, and he loves community, and he loves this kind of environment. And people like Mark are very rare in life. Most people decide one day, I'm done learning. And it's the most bizarre thing in the world to me. So I think on a philosophical level, the way you keep identifying stories is that you always remain the student. And then I think on a very tactile level, like 2 weeks ago, when, you know, I looked to my left laying on the ground in the padel court, and I could see my arm going in 2 different directions. And I could feel this extraordinary pain. And in that, I discovered something very fast. I thought, oh, wow, I'm not inclined towards self-pity, but I might be inclined towards self-loathing. Because the first thing that came to mind wasn't, why did this happen to me? I know why, because I'm an idiot. It's like I don't have I don't instinctively have a victim's mentality. And see, in that moment when you're laying there, in the moment you're in overwhelming pain and everything is collapsed on you, you discover things about yourself. So how do I find my stories? I remember intimately what I was thinking in those moments because I was paying attention. And so I don't have an inner voice that says, why did this happen to you? Why didn't God protect you? You know, why, you know, but I did have a voice that said, you're just an idiot. Why would you do this? Why can't you just not run for the ball? And so I realized, oh, I wonder how many people struggle with self-loathing and how many people struggle with self-pity. And I instantly saw a dichotomy I would have never seen before, because I'm paying attention to the real inner struggle of my soul. And I actually think the reason I never run out of stories is that even when I'm like writhing in unbelievable pain, my brain is still learning. I'm paying attention and trying to figure out, how can I help other people? And I literally was going through my mind going, what can I learn from this to help other people? And that's even before the ambulance took me away. And I think if you posture your life where you're going, I want my life to be a learning filter for people. Like, I want to learn so that I can help other people. Then you don't, nothing becomes obsolete. Like, nothing's wasted. When you're going through pain, you're learning how to help people in pain. When you're going, you know, when you're going through joy, you're helping people know how to process joy. When you have success, you're learning how to help people not get crushed by success. And so a huge part of like what makes life interesting to me isn't life itself. It's what I can learn from life to help other people live. And I think this is where I do think if I have like a gift, I see story in everything. Like, and it just, all of life for me is a learning opportunity. And I think sometimes we waste those. We waste those in self-pity. We waste those by by becoming a victim. We waste those by just thinking our moment is just our moment rather than the world's moment. And so I just encourage you to go, I'm going through things because I'm becoming a better human being. But if I go through them well and pay attention, I can help other people who are going through the same thing. And that for me is like an incredible like privilege. I would never want to dislocate my elbow. Like it was incredibly painful, and it's still painful to this day. But I'm not wasting it. I don't want, like if, people use the language of universe. If the universe is trying to teach you something, learn it so you don't have to go through it again. Like, I don't want to learn whatever I have to learn in this moment later by going through something similar again. And I want to extract everything necessary from this moment.
Wow, that's amazing. Thank you.
All right.
Scott, you there?
Oh, Scott?
Yeah. Who do you have?
I am. Thanks. So I have a question really about what you're talking about. I'm a challenger, motivator, healer. That's what my 7 frequencies came up. Totally surprised. I figured professor would be in there somewhere, but it wasn't even, if it could rank it, I don't know where it would be. And then in my strengths, I'm belief and connectedness are my top 2.
Mm-hmm.
And my issue isn't talking about things I don't know about. My issue is when I talk about things that I know about and I'm passionate about and consumed with, like you said, right? Always want to grow in that knowledge. I almost become, for lack of a better way to talk about it, a locomotive going downhill with no brakes. I just love to talk about it. Is there anything, I don't know if this is just, I hope it's not just me, but maybe it was you too, or is there anything that you noticed that you could do within yourself to not like ramp up your energy level from that, like I'm a 1 right now, but then when I get really excited, I become really demonstrative and all these other things. And I think sometimes I overwhelm the person I'm talking to, and I don't want that to happen because I don't want them to check out. And so is there anything that you've noticed within yourself or within people that you interact with, that they were able to kind of put some brakes and some checks and some parameters around that help them to really talk and not to lose the passion, but to not overwhelm? Does that make sense?
Absolutely. If you have belief in your top 2, my wife has belief in her top 2 in the Strength Finder. And what was your number 1?
My number 1 in Strength Finder?
No, in 7 frequencies.
Challenger,
Motivator,
healer.
All right. I think one of the things is that when you have high belief, you don't ever start at the beginning. You always start at the end.
That's true.
You don't realize it oftentimes because you assume everyone should believe what you believe. And so the reason you come across like a locomotive is because people don't feel that you give them the right to disagree.
Okay.
And so what you have to begin with as a challenger is with the question, not the answer. And so my challenge to you would be, whenever you want to talk about anything you have a strong belief in, make the argument for the other side first, so that the other person feels understood.
Got it.
They won't ever move to your conclusion if they don't believe you understand their perspective.
That's great.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you.
That's awesome. Thank you.
Hey, Caleb, how you doing? We got a lot more questions. Hey, Caleb.
Hey, how's it going? Excited to see y'all on Friday. I have a question about this kind of pendulum you described, Erwin, about like the belief in the knowledge. And I'm 20 years old right now. So I wanted to ask you, like, if you could go back to your 20-year-old self and just give a piece of advice around that pendulum and how to navigate that, especially when you're 20 and you're still learning a lot about life and having a lot of your paradigm shifting. What piece of advice would you give that younger version of yourself based on what you described back there?
I would just say like fail boldly. It's like, you're going to fail anyway. So you might as well fail boldly, and fail, like, don't waste failure. I think a lot of times, to me, the way you waste your 20s is you fail mildly. So you never really learn much. You don't learn about yourself. You don't learn about your intuition. You don't learn about your gut. You don't learn about the world around you. And so if you fail like cautiously, your learning model is going to be very, very small. If you fail boldly, your learning model is going to be really, really big. And then I would also work from the flip side and go integrate outside thinking that you disagree with. Because you already know what you agree with. And if you don't integrate outside thinking that you disagree with, you're not going to expand your capacity to see. People have different perspectives and different visions or different values for a reason. And you don't have to agree with them, but if you can't see with them, you will not expand your capacity to see. So what I would say is like, fail boldly and just go after things, and don't worry about it. Don't go, oh, but I want to fail. Just assume you are going to fail. Fail till you're 29. And just go, of course I'm going to fail. I'm just going to fail boldly. And I'm going to have some successes in here, but I won't necessarily know which ones are going to be successful. So I'm going to act like everything's going to be successful and not be surprised when something's successful and not be surprised when something fails. And because right now it's all about the process. It's all about the learning model of me. And then don't discount outside perspectives. Integrate them as much as you can. Understand them. Become really well-rounded in your ability to see the world from dissenting views. And that will help you grow and texturize as a person. I think that's one of the reasons that I was able to grow, was that I never discounted whether a person was a liberal or a conservative, whether a person was a Democrat or a Republican, whether a person was a Buddhist or an atheist, whether a person was a Muslim or a Christian. I just integrated as much as I could the way people understood and saw the world, and allowed that to help me become a much more complex person. And I honestly, I wanted to grow as a human being. Like I wanted to be able to sit with anyone in the world and go, I see the world from your perspective. And that for me was a huge goal. And that's what I would say in your 20s is so important. Those two things.
Amazing. Amazing. Hey, Fernando, how you doing, man?
Good, good. I'm excited to see you guys on Friday. I had to pull some strings to get there, but super pumped. So, what you were saying, Erwin, about when we feel like we know more than we actually do, would you say that's why the church has hurt so much other people? Because what you just said, also not integrating others' beliefs, and also thinking that we know it all, and especially now that we gave our life to God, He's just gonna automatically download all that information and knowledge that we need.
I think we have to remember, like, whenever you say the church, that the church is just a slice of humanity. The reason people in the church get hurt is because humans get hurt. And for those of you who, like, I'm so glad I was like irreligious, because I know the irreligious people hurt irreligious people. I'm not confused that, oh, only bad things happen in the church. No, bad things happen everywhere. And people let you down at work. People are going to let you down in your family. People are going to let you down in your political system. People are going to let you down in your religion or your church or your synagogue or your temple. The reality is that human beings are imperfect, and whenever we get together as a group, we mess up. And until we can get a hold of that, we're always going to blame some institution or some group. And it makes it easier for me, because I don't have to spend my life like, I don't blame the church for what I've gone through. I don't blame Democrats for what I've gone through. I don't blame Republicans. I just go, it's the mess of being human. And then we organize and we call it something. But it's still us. You know, and that's why it's better just to make it very human. I just want to be a person of truth. I want to be a person who's kind. I want to have integrity. I want to act in a way that elevates society. I don't care how other people act. I don't care what other people do. I don't care what other people choose as their value system. The one I choose is the one that really matters. And, you know, and so I'm trying to create a world that's different than the world that people normally experience. And that's what you and I both need to do.
Love it.
I love it. Hey, Warren, how are you?
Good. I'm so excited to be there tomorrow. And Erwin, my question has to do with the dark side. Um, so my three was healer, motivator, and then seer. And I'm excited to explore all of those. But when I read about the cipher and the dark side, it really grosses me out. So when you're communicating publicly without violating the over disclosure, you know, and getting into gross things, do you find it helpful to just come out with your dark side and talk about, even if it's real time? And with the cipher and the healer, the idea behind that is empathy. And am I looking for people to have empathy towards me, or am I serving them with, you know, giving them something that communicates empathy? So if maybe even in the moment I'm feeling, I am such a cipher right now, I need this more than maybe they do. Because in some circumstances, it's actually a healing process for me. And I don't think it's being codependent, but, you know, so my question is it good or helpful to disclose that dark side, and might doing that help dissipate the dark side?
Well, it's a great question, a very honest one. I have a couple of rules of thumb, Warren. Never use the stage for personal therapy.
Yeah.
You know, and so like, so when you're speaking to an audience and you're feeling like, man, I'm not doing well, or like I can feel my dark side is like informing me. Don't use the stage for therapy, because it will not go well. That's actually your dark side taking over. And what I would say is you have an internal mechanism in your soul, and it's called choice.
Right.
And the moment you become aware of it, and is, to me, like, I feel like our conscience, if I could just say, is like, it's connected to the universal mind of God. And the moment you go, oh, wow, I'm actually being from my dark side, you should see that as your conscience going, Warren, shift.
Yeah.
So instead of talking about it, which actually gives it more power, move away from it. Okay. And just shift and go, I'm going to focus on the room. I'm going to focus on someone else. I'm going to focus on my listener, and I'll deal with you later. You know, and but right now you don't get the stage.
Perfect.
Does that make sense?
Perfect. Yes, thank you.
And then, because I think that you're very hard on yourself, I just want to remind you of something else. All of us have dark sides. I think more noble men are aware of them, and less noble men are not. And I say men in the human sense of men and women. And so I think the sad thing to me sometimes is the most noble people are the ones who are hardest on themselves. And so just be aware, you're aware of the struggle because you are winning that battle.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hey, JC, how you doing, man?
Hey guys, how are you? I had a situation recently where someone really hurt me. And you mentioned something earlier, Erwin, about victim mentality, and how you have the choice to either be a victim, or move on from it. I guess from your experience, you know, how do you avoid victim mentality when you're actually feeling the pain of that hurt?
That's a really good question, a very honest one. when I say that, I choose not to be a victim, it doesn't mean that I can choose to not be hurt. And most of the time, you can only be hurt in direct proportion to which you love the other person. And because if someone you don't care about does something, it doesn't affect you at all. And so a part of what we feel is actually, it's almost like shame. I can't believe I cared so much about this person to give them the room to hurt me so deeply. And that's where the victimization comes from, because you care, you loved, you respected, you trusted this person. And so I think the first thing you have to realize is that your anger is not really toward them, it's toward yourself. That you let them into that space where they could have that much power. Does that make sense? And if you don't really recognize that, you're going to move towards self-loathing. And so, when I've done that recently, I could see 1,000 reasons why I should have done things better. 1,000 ways I could have, improved my role in something. And so the victimization makes you powerless, because it really isn't about the choices they made. It's about the choices you made that allowed them to make the choices they made. Because in life, you cannot control the choices other people make. And I think that you're a very smart person. And so you can't control the people's choices. So you're not even angry about that. You're angry that you made choices that allowed them to make those choices in your life. So ironically, the person you have to forgive is yourself. And if you can forgive yourself and go, okay, that's where I was, but not where I am. I've learned. I'm not going to become hardened, but I am going to become wiser. And if you grow from it, you can't be a victim and grow from something. And you can't grow from something as long as you're a victim. So the way you get past it is you don't try to change the hurt. The hurt is real. To me, absorb the hurt. The hurt just reminds you you're human. The hurt reminds you cared, and you still care. The hurt reminds you that you're in an opportunity of learning at a deep human level. And then you have to forgive yourself and go, I'm not going to be angry at myself for trusting someone because they didn't merit that trust. Because I refuse to not trust people in the future. So realize what you did, you probably did the right thing with the wrong person. And just don't stop doing the right thing because you don't know if they're the right person or not. And just remember this one little thing, life is a risk. And if you stop risking relationally, you'll stop living. So absorb that pain, accept the fact that you're going to grow through this. You're not responsible for that other person not living up to their social contract. And how you relate to people in the future. I want you to stay tender-hearted and open, but wise, and having learned from it. I hope that helps.
Hey, Mehul, how are you?
Oh, we have a lot of hands.
Yep.
I'm doing
I'll
well.
answer these last 4 questions.
Sorry.
No, go for it. No, please.
So a moment ago, you were mentioning about growing knowledge, but your fuel is belief, and have knowledge catch up to belief, not belief dumb down to knowledge. As I was thinking about that and some of the other things that have been said, worldview. I'm thinking like worldview is informed by knowledge, and then and also what you choose to believe. My problem, my difficulty is I often rely very much on knowledge. I'm a lifelong learner, always trying to learn new things. And at some point it's like you have to allow that space for belief. I'm wondering, do you have any kind of insight on well, you always have insight, but do you have anything to say about in terms of relying more on the belief side of things as opposed to being so heavily dependent on knowledge to inform your beliefs and your worldview?
Yeah, what
Does
I
that
would say,
make sense?
yeah,
Yeah.
if you're heavily skewed on the knowledge side, you're using knowledge as a way to keep your life safe.
Yeah.
And people who are like information based dominantly rather than like intuitively based, and usually move toward low risk. So
Yes.
some of it is you have to do some self-examination. Go, when did I know the right thing to do and I just pretended I didn't have enough information? Because here's the question: do you need to know everything about a subject to act, or do you need to know enough to act? And what you should be asking yourself is, do I know enough to act? Does that make sense? Because once you know enough to act, everything else is just procrastination. And you can look like an intellectual, but it's just procrastination. All right, I think we're finished with that one. All right, let's keep going.
Okay.
Let's go. Speed round.
Hey, Serena, how are you?
Hey guys. Hello. Sorry, I just wanted to ask really quickly. So as I've been sitting in my frequencies, right, of like commander and challenger, and trying to understand it in the industry that I'm in, right? It's a very male dominated industry. And over the years, your work product has to stand on its own, right? To kind of be what it is. But I've found that when I'm in my frequency, which is most natural to me, right, it can be perceived as too much, too passionate, and so like there's this balance of then like making myself small to kind of fit the room. And so my question is like, how do you remain true to yourself in the spaces that you're in, but also giving way to maybe not overpowering or over dominating, if that makes sense?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, if you're a commander challenger, you fill the room. And
Welcome. No.
yeah, and so you just need to recognize that you just have a big energy, and there may be, I don't know where you work, but there might be almost like a social contract of what kind of energy you're supposed to bring into the room. It's unspoken, but you have to be able to read the room. You have to be able to look and go, how do other people who are successful here, how do they bring their ideas to the table?
Mm-hmm.
And so some of it for me is that you just need to be more strategic. We put a lot of emphasis on, I need to be myself. And I'm like, no, if I could just be this blunt, no, I want to win.
Yeah.
And, do you want to be yourself, or do you want to succeed? Right? Do you want to be yourself, or do you want your idea to win? And for me, usually the idea is more important to me than me.
Okay.
And so if you have something you feel like the company must do, ask yourself, as a commander challenger, what's the best strategy for me to present this idea, this tactic, this proposal? And you use your talent as a servant to the idea, the outcome you're trying to achieve. And if it's, one of the things, like I have, this thing called ideation. And so I have 10,000 ideas a second. And I could say, I just got to be me. I just got to bring all my ideas to the room. But I used to drown people with my ideas, like they were just dying. And not only that, they couldn't bring their ideas, because I can give you 100 ideas before most people can give you one. But here's the thing. Their one idea might be better than my 100 ideas, but they don't get a chance, because I'm just, I'm Machine Gun Kelly. I'm just like, running it through. So I had to learn how to submit to the larger goal of the best idea emerging. And so I made a rule. I don't share an idea until the room has all shared their ideas. Like I'm the tail gunner. I bring my ideas if the ideas haven't emerged, if the best idea hasn't risen up, if there isn't enough juice in the room to help us be creative. And that shifted my whole life. It didn't make me less me. It made me a more strategic me. And that's what I'd say. You need to be a strategic version of a commander challenger in your corporate environment.
Thank you. That's really helpful.
Awesome.
Dad, do you know who Machine Gun Kelly is?
I do. Why?
No, I'm just wondering.
Oh, no. Your Machine Gun Kelly is different than my Machine Gun Kelly.
Oh, who's your Machine Gun Kelly?
You don't realize your generation is a generation of copycats.
All right. Hey, Joe, how you doing?
Who'd you ask for?
Joseph.
Hey guys, thank you for taking the moment. I appreciate this. So I had a very awesome meeting with my supervisor just a second ago. And we were going over areas of improvement and stuff like that. And he was basically saying like, hey Joe, sometimes you ask for the why when you drive and it's not the right time for it. And kind of what I was wondering is I feel like I really do lean into the Maven. So healer, Maven, Seer, and I lean into the Maven a lot. And I was just wondering, like, I usually think that the way that I'm thinking is the right way to think. And I'm like, and sometimes I feel like I can be a logic bully. So I'm like, hey, let's break this down. And I start breaking it down and then I'll pick things apart. And I just wanted to, I feel like I've heard you say that you experienced something similar. And if that's the case, one, how do you specifically work with people that either you're leading or that you're being led by? How do you make sure that you are communicating in a kind, effective way where you're also giving them potentially a new way of seeing something?
No, Joseph, I've always been easy to work with. I've just been lovely. But
the arena's not for lying. It's for self-mastery.
Joseph, I don't know why, but I'm getting this feeling that when you ask why, what you're actually doing is making a statement and not asking a question. Your statement is, we should be doing this. And I think the reason your supervisor is saying you're asking why at the wrong time, what he's actually saying is you're being defiant to what we're trying to accomplish. And when I need you to cooperate, you're actually being critical. And so here's the thing. If you have any Maven in you, you can be a pain in the butt. And, because you're always there's no idea, no action that ever perfectly fits a philosophy.
Yeah.
Ideals are beautiful. And once you act, the ideal is lost in the action. So what I would say is, instead of asking why, because I think you know why, you just don't think that they're acting on the why. I think you're actually saying this doesn't really match who we're supposed to be. It's more like, why are we doing this? And so I would work the other way around. Ask yourself, how can I serve my boss's intention?
Okay.
I think of it a little different. How do I help them win so then I can get my idea done next time?
Yes.
Because I have a higher advantage.
That's exactly what I'm saying in a kind way. How do I help them win so I can win later?
Yeah. The more I help my boss win and he knows that I'm a yes guy, and then I help him win, even when I don't like it, he'll ask me my ideas. And if he doesn't, I will find another guy that I like working for better.
That's fair. Okay.
Yeah. So your first step right now is, how do I help my boss succeed?
Mm-hmm.
And then earn the right to have the other conversation.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Mavens are always asking why, even when they shouldn't be. Even when they know why, they're just implying that your why is wrong.
Or that we're not actually doing it.
We're not going to do it. This is our way of going. We're not agreeing.
Yeah, that's good. All right. Thank you, guys.
Right. And we'll be doing therapy with Joseph later.
Hey, Andy, what's up, man? How are you?
Hey, how's it going, guys? back to the conversation of knowledge and belief. I feel like I can grasp like how to increase in knowledge, but my question is, how do you increase in belief? Back to how you were framing it earlier.
Yeah, I would say you have to start with one action at a time. Belief materializes in action. Anything that doesn't create an action is not a belief. It's an idea. And people with belief act. And that really is a distinguishing characteristic. And so you know what your beliefs are, but the things that drive you to action. So how do you increase your beliefs? You act on something. And I don't even care where, you just pick one. Because the practice of actualizing your beliefs will grow. You can actually make that an internal structure, but it only becomes an internal structure by acting. Does that make sense? Action is the muscle of belief.
Love it.
Good question.
Hey, Carol, how are you?
Hi. So I actually have a different experience from what you guys are talking about. I typically find myself talking to people that have a strong opinion on something that's not based on facts. So why do you think, hello?
Can you give an
we're
example?
right here.
Yeah, okay. So an example would be like, I don't know, like someone will say, all pastors steal money from the church, or
Is that an example that has been said to you?
yeah, I've actually had this conversation because my dad was a pastor for like over 20 years, and someone I met was kind of bashing on the church and how pastors are greedy and they steal from the church. And I'm like, well, not necessarily. And they're just, I found myself speaking with people that have very strong opinions on something that's not really translated into facts. So
Well, a lot of pastors do.
yeah, so I mean that was
That's factual.
Yeah, so that was my conversation with them. Like, I don't think you can just generalize everyone.
Yeah.
I think there are bad people everywhere, just like I've heard of, I don't know, doctors or dentists that have essayed patients, right? Does that mean that every doctor and every dentist does that? No. So that's kind of like what the conversation I was trying to have with that person. And so why do you think that some people just kind of have a lot of opinion and they just kind of generalize everyone
Yeah,
as
I don't
opposed
think
to
some people do. I think most people do.
yeah.
And I think that's just sort of like the human currency is opinion. And we all have them, And I remember one time years ago being in an argument with someone and they said, well, that's just your opinion. And I said, well, of course it's mine because I'm not expressing someone else's opinion. I'm just expressing mine. But one of the things you want to look at is whenever people use extreme language, always, never, all, none. The moment someone uses extreme language, it's an emotional argument and they're not trying to really, they're not based in facts. So when someone says every pastor, I would just go, do you really think it's every pastor? Or do you think maybe it's every pastor you've experienced? Just like trying to root some of their emotions, grounding it back in reality, and do you find that people are genuinely untrustworthy? Like people who say things like, every pastor is unethical. They think every person is unethical, actually. They think every rich person is unethical. They think every politician is unethical. They'll work from generalizations like that. And so we have to realize is that when you're dealing with someone who's using absolute language, you can't talk about facts.
Yeah.
Would be a better answer when someone says, well, all pastors, whatever, steal money. You should say, wow, you must have really been hurt. That's actually the better response, is dealing with the real issue is you must have really been hurt. You want to talk about it. And because what that person is doing is they're using extreme statements to hide deep pain in their life. And so instead of arguing non-facts, deal with like true human emotion. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I love that answer.
Yeah.
And just a little side note, I know in the beginning of the year, I spoke about how much the arena has changed my life, right? With my company, with my relationship, and some comments that I've had lately is when I have conversations with people, they'll they'll ask me, do you have higher education? Or they'll ask me, wow, you speak very well. Like, you need to record that. That comment would go viral. And it's funny because I'm just finding that's so funny. And I feel like the arena has really changed even the way I speak. And a lot of people that I've met have even been shocked by just the way that I think and the way that I talk. And it's really thanks to this community, and it's been life-changing, and it's been so amazing. So thank you.
Well, we love you.
Thanks,
You're our favorite Latino boss.
Yes.
Yes. And that's why I asked like specific situations, because I know you have a lot of one-on-one conversations with a lot of different people.
Yeah. And I've had other ones, that have, some people that customers that come in and say things about prices, right? And I'm like, that's not factual. I can't sell a taco for $1. That's the cost. And you know what I mean? Like, I've noticed being around people that have such strong opinions on things, but I'm like, you're not based on facts. You're based on pure opinion.
See, now
And
there are no ethical tacos. Tacos all over the chart.
exactly. I'm like, if a taco's $1, run. You don't want to eat that taco, trust me. So I mean, those are the things that I'm just kind of finding a little interesting.
I think that's the situation where you say, instead of defending the taco, you go, I love you too much as a customer to sell you a $1 taco.
Yeah.
Yeah. And talk about the advantages of the meat you use or the product you're using. And
yes.
But yeah, we can talk about the money laundering thing in the future. I was at a wedding in Greece last year, and that was and the bride actually asked me at the reception. She was a little intoxicated, So you guys money launder through the church, and so we'll go into that deeper, the fun stories. But guys, thank you so much. We're very much looking forward to seeing you guys this week. Let us know on the Arena community page when you guys land, when you guys get in town. We'll see you guys bright and early, 8:30 on Friday morning. We will see you guys. You do not want to miss it. We will see you guys this weekend. Do everything you can to get there. Bye,
Love you guys. God bless.